It's good to be here again. I've been coming here for the last few years, and it's always a wonderful group of people to talk to because everyone has varied interest and great questions, and it's a very comfortable, a very comfortable group to just meet people. Some I know from the temple. I'm with the Blue Lotus Buddhist Temple in Woodstock, which we've been an organization for about 15 years, but we only bought the building. We bought the old Unitarian Church in Woodstock, but we'd been meeting for 10 years in the basement. And so about 5 years ago, we bought the building, and we've really grown. We have lots of meditation services, and we have the entire building, so we can do whatever we want. It's all ours. So we have lots of activities. I brought our Buddha Day booklet. We put out a book every year, and it has good articles, and we put it out on Visakha Day, or Buddha Day, which is usually in May, and that's the holiday that represents the Buddha's birth and his enlightenment, and then what we call his parinibbana, or his final enlightenment, when he died. And that's the biggest Buddhist holiday of the year, and it's fun and lots of celebration and lots of food to share with everybody. So part of our celebration is we put out this book every year. So I put some on the tables that has more information about the temple, and we have some good articles that we had. An article from Sharon Salzberg and Jack Kornfield and a few others that are in that booklet, and information just in general about the temple. So help yourself to those. So how many of you know feel like you know a lot about Buddhism? Okay, and how many of you feel like you have a relatively regular meditation practice? Okay. That's good. That's about, I'd say, a third of the audience. How many of you would like to meditate, but you don't do it? That's a bigger group than the first group. That's what most of us usually say. No matter how much we practice, we're always saying, I wish I could practice more, or I wish I practiced longer. So the first thing we try to teach about Buddhism is that we need to let go of that striving and that trying, and just allow yourself to be and to find out who you already are. Nothing new you have to become, nothing new you have to find out about yourself, but we just try to become more quiet and more still and discover who's already here. And it's very hard, though, with Westerners, maybe with everybody, but with Westerners to say slow down and to say just stop, and you're enough already. You just don't know who you are, but you're already okay, you're already fine. What you need to do is just discover that. And it's very hard. As soon as we think we grasp the concept, then we're thinking, what else do I need to achieve in this lifetime? And where else do I need to go? And what else do I need to learn to do? And then we're off again, and then we tend to forget about ourselves when we do that. And our lives are very full and very busy, and in this group alone, I can tell just by looking at your ages, several of you are probably still in school, and several of you have young children, and then several of you are probably taking care of your parents, and maybe have 2 or 3 generations living in your house. And if you're like me, when my first ordination was in 2007, and I thought my 2 children were out of the house because my daughter had been in college for a few years and my son was on his way. And then I discovered within 6 months that they keep coming back, no matter how far away they go. And so there were several years in there where I kept thinking, I think I need a smaller place to live. That's why monastics love their kutis, meditation huts, and living in a monastery, because your family can't come back and live with you. And not that families aren't wonderful, but it's enough is enough already, right? So that was something I hadn't figured out. And now I live in a real tiny apartment. And next week, actually, the 1st of July, I'm moving out to a monastery in California near Joshua Tree, very small. I guess you could say an old-fashioned word for it would be a nunnery, but it's a monastery with me, there'll be 5, and we may top out at 6 nuns living there. And it's really in the middle of, it feels like it's in the middle of nowhere, but it's 40 minutes from Palm Springs and 10 minutes from Joshua Tree, and a little bit over an hour and a half from LA or San Diego. But it's very, we all have kutis to live in. So even if my kids come to visit, they can't stay in my kuti with me. And these kutis are quite luxurious. They're about 10 feet by 12 feet and very well insulated and heated and cooled, and a little porch on the front, but just big enough, just big enough to stay there, to be able to sleep in it and sit, to get away from people when we want to get away from people. And so that's going to be my next adventure. And I plan to stay there for about 6 months before I come back to check on things and see what it feels like. I think by then I'll make a decision about whether I can't leave Woodstock and the temple and my kids, or whether I'm ready to just go out there full time. But it's, even when you become a monastic, it doesn't mean that the busyness of our lives changes, which is another discovery I made. There's nothing magical. I mean, when I chose to become a monastic, it was simply, that was the direction I felt that I wanted to go in for my own personal practice. And my ideal would be that my life would become calmer and quieter and fewer distractions, and that's not usually in this country. And with the temple that I'm with Blue Lotus, that's usually not what happens. So my life is just as busy as I allow it to become, and there are always people who, want to meet, want to talk, want to invite me to something, and our temple is very active, very busy. So I think in this country, particularly we have a unique temple, because it's, our teacher, Bhante Sujata, is from Sri Lanka. But our population is almost all Westerners. So there just aren't any others like that we've been able to track down. So the busyness of being in this country just kind of gets soaked up in the life of the temple too. And there's a lot to be done. So I understand from my life before I became a monastic, but I also understand even as a monastic, my life is very busy. And I know we create that busyness for ourselves, but some environments are more conducive to allowing us to create that busyness. So what I wanted to talk to you about is one of the concepts that's really important in Buddhism, and I think it's a concept that can be one of the best things to think about and to try to work with in our lives to help us, whether you're Buddhist or not, to help you really learn more about yourself, and also to help you find a way to let go of some of the busyness in life, and to let go of a a lot of the rushing around and the things that seem to take up our time, so we can't find a spiritual practice that works for us, or we can't take the time to slow down or meditate. And that is the concept of no self, which is anatta in Pali, our canonical language in Buddhism, in the Theravadan tradition. And the concept is often misunderstood, and I think I have a handle on some of the easier ways to understand the concept of no self, and the ways that are very practical for us. And the longer I do what I do and talk to more people, I think it's a concept that can relieve us of a lot of the pressures that we live with every day if we can embrace it more and more. So in Buddhism, we talk about the 3 marks of existence. And anatta, or no self, is one. And suffering, dukkha, is another. And the third one is, and I always blank out when I count things, anicca, which is impermanence. So these are the marks of every living thing. We are not permanent. We do not actually have a self. Something might be like a soul, or like a part of us that's separate from ourselves. We don't actually have that other being part of us. And the suffering, or that feeling of dissatisfaction or unease, that's also a condition of all living beings. And that's what we call dukkha, or unsatisfactoriness, or suffering. Suffering's kind of a heavy word to use, and most people think, well, a lot of people who don't know much about Buddhism, they hear about dukkha, and then they think that Buddhism is all about suffering, and I don't need any more of that. I want something that's about being happy. And what the Buddha actually taught was that a mark of existence that we all share, suffering, is a condition of this life, but there's a cause for it, and there's a cure for it, and there's a way to deal with it and work with that. So we transform it into, we may experience pain and we'll experience sadness, but when we understand the nature of suffering, we learn to see through it. So suffering is created by our cravings, our craving for things to last, for things to be permanent. So impermanence is one of the other conditions. So when we crave permanence, we fall in love with someone, we don't want it to ever change. We want it to always be the way it is at the very beginning. And when we love someone, or we have a good friend, we don't want them to move away. We don't want to be separated from them. We don't want people to die. We don't want to lose our jobs. We don't want to lose our houses. We don't want to grow old. And when you look in the mirror and every day you find your hair's a different color, or there are more wrinkles, or it's harder to get up in the morning, or Tylenol is your best friend, then we recognize we're aging, and that's very hard. And my daughter's 29, and she's always looking for something for her crow's feet, for some kind of expensive lotion, and I can't see them on her. I mean, I don't think they exist. But it's not my reality. Her reality is that she needs some kind of lotion, and she's just spotlessly beautiful. She's just, and I just think she's suffering over what she sees are crow's feet in the corner of her eyes. And I look at her and I think, and I've thought it about her for many, many years. If you only knew how perfect you were, and how beautiful you are. And you could just forget that. You could just be, and So it's her life, it's not mine. But of course, as the outsider, I can look at it and see. So I don't think when I was 30, I wasn't as lovely as she is, but I didn't think I had crow's feet. So, so we all create our own suffering. So when we see that, our suffering is caused by our need to have things stay the same. So we're fighting something that isn't possible as a living being. And at the base of that craving then, that attachment, and it's just our wanting to cling to things. We want to cling to things that make us feel secure, or make us feel good, or make us feel protected so we have no fear. And anything we try to cling to is guaranteed to be something that's impermanent. So no matter how tightly we hold on to it, we can't. And so that's what creates our suffering. So at the root of that attachment and clinging is really ignorance about the nature of reality. And so all that suffering comes from ignorance. And I used to think the word ignorance, I grew up thinking that was a terrible word, that you just didn't call somebody ignorant. It was like calling them stupid. And so it was a hard word in Buddhism for me I always want to soften it. It doesn't, I don't want to be offensive with it. But it's really not, it is really just kind of innocent, pure, not understanding the realities of the natural world. And when we understand that, we see that everything is impermanent, that we can't cling to anything. And in fact, when I'm teaching, the image I always think about when I think about the teachings of the Buddha and about, well, all of these concepts that we work with, meditation and dealing with suffering, dealing with no self, dealing with impermanence, it's always, this is how we basically are most of the time, grabbing onto things. If something works for us, we want more of it. And the opposite of that is aversion. So when we're clinging to things, we also are averse to a lot of other things. We create, like, I want this, but I don't want that, so I push that away. That's equally strong. But instead of having that clinging to things that we desire, that we love, that we want, that make us happy for this moment, we need to always be like letting go of our grasp. Always, just that image of just always be opening up, let go, just let go of everything. Because we can't hold on to it. And if the thing itself doesn't change, we change. So we think we're going to love someone forever. We think we're going to stay somewhere forever. We think we want the same job forever. And then suddenly we realize, oh, we've changed. We don't feel the same way. We need to get away, or something else is calling us somewhere else. So constantly, either because we're changing or everything else is changing, we find that it's really painful to try to hang on to things. So that image is always to open up, to relax, to let go. And meditation is the same. The whole process of meditation is becoming comfortable. It's becoming relaxed. Because no matter how hard we try, how much we strive, how determined we are, sometimes all those things cause us to be more uptight. Like, I'm going to sit here and meditate, and I'm going to, clench my fist, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to squeeze my eyes shut, and I'm not going to open them. Well, that tension is creating stress, and that stress is suffering. So even with meditation, we have to learn how to relax. We have to learn how to enjoy it. And we have to learn how to let go of all of our demands on ourselves, that we do it a certain way, at a certain time, for a certain length of time. And then we can, once we surrender to all that, once we let go, then it becomes easier and easier to practice, because we know, well, if I need to start out 5 minutes a day, but I've been determined I'm going to do 45 minutes a day, what a relief. 5 minutes seems like a piece of cake. And if I go and I sit for 5 minutes and I enjoy it, then I'm more likely to go back again and try it again and do it again. And I'll naturally increase the time I'm sitting. And find a style that works for you, and find a place, and find just find what you need. But you have to do it by letting go of all of your preconceived ideas about what it should be. So, talking about preconceived ideas, then, a lot of what we are talking about when we talk about no self is that sometimes we call it our ego, but the self that we really don't have is something that we create, we make up. It's our personality, it's our perceptions about things, it's our analysis of things, it's our viewpoint, it's all of our preferences, which also then means it's all of our aversions. So that no self that we're always looking for and kind of don't know what we're talking about is what we're trying to do is to let go of all of that stuff that we've created. Just let it go. And we're clinging to those things. That's a big part of what we cling to, is our identity of ourself. So it can be your political views, it can be your family beliefs, it can be what you learned in school and the way you were taught, and what people in your neighborhood think about certain things, and it can be the music you prefer, or the food you prefer, and how you like to cook the food, and how you like to eat it, and what your habits are, and it goes on and on. So the easiest example to think about in this period of the year, this year, is politics. And think about your point of view politically. And the things that I've read that have interested me the most in the last few years has been reading that there are a lot of scientists who say that you pretty much it's pretty much determined when you're a little kid what your political views will be for the rest of your life. That they can actually identify people as children and know if they're going to be liberal Democrat or conservative, and to me, I believe that's absolutely true, because I think we all have tendencies that somehow we had. Think about what you thought as a child, or think about your life and your family, and now think about if you know who you'd like to see as president. Is there anyone who's going to walk up and convince you to vote for the person who's from the other party? I mean, do you go around asking people, can you give me your opinions about who I should vote for? Because I just don't have a clue. We usually know way ahead of time, and we know what we're leaning. We know the way we lean, and then we try to find a candidate who matches up to it. And usually we found a party that at least partially we kind of fall, it's a preference, we have a slight preference for. And we may have another party that we have a great aversion to, or a candidate, but we easily can see how we have our own ideas about politics and who we want to vote for. Whether we're super happy or not very happy, or we might even be borderline, but very few of us can be convinced according to the stuff that I've read, very few of us are actually on the fence. There are very few of us who can be persuaded to go with someone else. And so we are characters of all of these preferences and aversions, and the way that we like ourselves to be seen, and the way we like to think of ourselves. And what the Buddha taught was all of that is like a false personality. All of that is just, that's just the way we carry ourselves through this life. And a lot of that we do because it protects us, and it makes life easier. And it makes it easier to find friends. It makes us easier to know people that we are more comfortable with. And so it's very helpful. And it may make our way through life, make it easier to be successful, because we can kind of define the world, and we can see it a certain way, and we can see where we feel like we belong and where we don't. But the concept of no self is that all of that is just delusion. All of that is just the preferences and the aversions we have to things. And our body, even at the most basic level, is always is leaning towards preferences and pulling away from things that we have aversion to. And so what the Buddha asks us to do is to always just be aware, of that. It's almost like a cellular movement towards something. Like, think if you go past a restaurant, you know the restaurant you might walk by, and you have a preference for the smell, the fragrance. And there are others you might walk by that you have a real aversion to. When my son was little, we could not get him into a Subway or a deli counter, into a delicatessen. He wouldn't even walk in the door. And even in a grocery store, he wouldn't walk up to the deli counter. And I never could figure it out. And he said it just had a bad smell to him. It smelled and it wasn't the smell of meat or anything. I think it was a smell of vinegar and spices. And he still won't go. You still can't get him into a store. He's a cook. Now he's a chef, which is unbelievable occupation that this kid ended up being, because he ate white food for a couple of years, and he ate it was chicken nuggets for all of you. I know you know kids like this. Peanut butter and jelly for a couple of years, and then all white food, and then macaroni and cheese for a year, and that would be it. And never may force him to go into a Subway or delicatessen. And that was a smell. It was a smell of the food. And then other things would be, I'm sure, the texture or whatever. I don't know what the white food thing is about, but so now he still has the Subway aversion and the delicatessen aversion, but he cooks, so he eats things that I never believed that he was going to eat. So somehow he's managed to get over some of his aversions, but thank goodness, because it was very difficult when he was a kid. But we're always, you think about the fragrances that you like, and some fragrances just are offensive. But I just did a silent retreat with a group, and we do it about 3 times a year on Lake Michigan in Racine. And everyone's always at the lake as much as they can be, even in the winter, because it's so beautiful. It's like being at the ocean, because you have the rocks, the water crashing up against the rocks and freezing. And this year it was summer. Everybody was so excited to go and be able to go down by the water without wearing a coat and a hat. But there were these little fish, and I think they're called an alewife. and it was the time for them to be washing up ashore and dying. So the beaches were lined with those dead fish. So the first day we got there, there were some people who came back and said, the smell is so bad. You walk out of this building, and the retreat center's right up on a real low cliff, right at the lake. And some people could smell the fish, the dead fish, all the way up and near the door. And other people were actually walking on the beach, and they didn't notice it once they got down there. And especially if you came in on one side of the beach area. And so it was amazing to me, the different variations in how bad the odor was to people. And so the next morning I went down, and I wanted to see how the smell affected me. And I had made a joke to people about when we do walking meditation, see how far you can go into the odor, and just see if you can have no aversion, to see either your aversion or lack of it to that smell. And when I went down, I got down the next morning, and I got 2 feet onto the beach, literally 2 steps out into the sand. No smell before that, but 2 steps onto the sand, and there was just like a wall of smell. And so I tried to stay in it as long as I could, and it wasn't very long. You know, I stayed on my side of the wall. And then I started noticing all the dead fish and thinking about, how many animals those fish were feeding, and how maybe it kept the humans away from the beach for a while so the animals could have it. But everybody in the group had a different threshold of that smell being a bad smell, or a couple of people who really wanted to be on the beach, they got over it. They said, well, they knew the smell would go away if they were out there for a little bit. So it was very interesting just for people to watch their reaction to it. So if we want to work with the concept of no self, we let go of all of those aversions that we have and those preferences. Now a lot of those aversions and preferences are part of our fight or flight response. They're part of our survival as humans. So a lot of it has been what's kept us a species to this point, and a lot of it is what caused our ancestors to survive. But I think that what the Buddha was always teaching was for us to keep evolving, that he saw the capacity for our minds to expand so much further than even our bodies had. I mean, he saw the potential for us to be so much more involved in using our brains. And so instead of just saying, well, that's our DNA, there's a purpose that serves biologically. Well, that's true, and we always need to look at that, but we can push that envelope. We can push and see how much more in our lifetime we can develop our capacity to understand the nature of reality. And so letting go, even if we just do it when we're, and maybe when we're practicing, when we're practicing meditation, or when we take select times in our day where we can just think about who we really are and who we really are not. And so all those things that are our preferences and our aversions, all of those are not who we are. And the Buddha's language, he would always say to people when they'd ask him a question that maybe involves someone else, or it involves something that he was trying to suggest they didn't need to be involved in or worried about, he would say, this is not me, this is not who I am, this is not mine. Not me, not mine, not who I am. And I think that's the question we can always ask ourselves. Is this me? Is this mine? Is this who I am? And that helps us see right away what that ego, what that personality or that anatta is. And then it's something that we can, if we really work with it and really try to be clear about it, that can become something that we can let drop aside. We can let go of it. We can relax and let go of it. So a simple example would be if you have a family member and you're getting into political arguments all the time because they're for the one person and you're for the other person, if you really look at that, you can realize, is this me? Is this mine? Is it who I am? And maybe you can just let go of the need to argue with someone about it. They're not going to change their mind. You're not going to change your mind. So when those arguments that we have, and sometimes we love those arguments, it's how we interact with certain people. And so that can be something we look at too. Is this style of entertainment, is that me? Is that mine? Is that who I am? Do I just like to argue with people so I just provoke an argument? So if we ask ourselves that question over and over and over again, we can start seeing the things that are not really, they might be things that have carried us this far, but we don't need to be protected like that anymore. Or maybe now that we understand what we are not, those are things that more and more we can loosen our grip on. So to me, it becomes a very easy concept to understand, but a very hard one to practice, because we are very attached at the most basic level. So maybe the way think about your parents. Think how much you probably talk like them and sound like them. And it's always, I'm lucky my mom's still alive, she's 93. But I can hear in my voice, if I talk to her on the phone, then I hear my voice and I hear her voice for days after we talk. And sometimes it's not the stuff that I want to hear in my voice, And my kids hear it. My kids know that when I'm talking a certain way, it's just like my mom. So a lot of those things that we think of as, a lot of these are qualities that we have learned from the parents we were raised by and the communities we were raised in. And so even when we think, oh, I'm not that anymore, I've changed a lot, we still unconsciously carry a lot of things with us. So it's very hard. So for me, it's not just that voice, but it might also be my preferences for food and my preferences for maybe, I grew up in Texas, so I'm Southern. So it might be my preference that things be slower than they are in the Midwest. When I first moved here about 30 years ago, I moved to the Lake Geneva area, so I thought this is the smallest town I've ever lived in. So it was very country in a way, but people talked fast and people moved fast. And I lived in California for years, and people in the Midwest talk much faster and walk much faster. So it's interesting. Things are never like they seem at first. So, but all those are just preferences I have, and it's just based on maybe where I'm from or my family, or they're all preferences. So they're not better or worse than anything else anybody does. So if we start blowing that up, everything we do, everything that's part of our, that's ego-based, or it's part of our personality, all those are just preferences. And those preferences, aversions are equally strong. So most of what causes us to make decisions in our life are based on those preferences and our aversions. And there's a lot of work that's been done on how people smell to each other has a lot to do with how attracted we are. And especially if, younger people. And I don't know if those hormones are still working at all as we get older. I'm not sure. But think about your 20s. Well, how you smell and how other people smell is really important, right? When I was younger, men wore Brute, if anybody even remember. A lot of it. It's like now I can, and women wore certain, in high school we wore certain colognes that make me gag when I think about it now. And then in college it was something else, but there's all that stuff that goes on with even fragrances. So, and my dad wore Old Spice, of course. So a boyfriend could never wear Old Spice. That just wasn't going to work. So even things like that, maybe if someone smells like someone that we once loved or someone we care about, all those hormonal things that cause us to have certain odors, that's how we decide who we are interested in, who we're attracted to, who we want to sit next to, who we want to hang out with. And those are things acting on us all the time that we don't even have an awareness of. So we have all of that going on with all of our senses. If someone's voice sounds pleasant, if someone looks pleasant to us, I know from one experience I've had when I started practicing loving kindness meditation. I think it's a very powerful practice, and you see changes in yourself right away. But I was working at the time with I was teaching in a prison, so there are a lot of people who were social workers and teachers, but then a lot of people who were pretty much saw themselves just as guards. But there was one person that I had so much aversion to, and it was the way he walked. It was really just, I'd see him walking down the hall, and he just looked like he didn't care, and he was kind of shuffling. And for some reason, and a lot of people sort of made jokes about him. And so I developed an aversion to him. I didn't even know him. And then I realized, once I started practicing loving kindness, and we had to, and I was leading it, and I always told people to think of someone who's a difficult person in your head, someone that you feel like you have challenges with. And that person came up into my head one time, and it surprised me because I didn't think about him very often. But I had to, because he came up as a difficult person, I started sending loving kindness to him. And within a couple of weeks, I ran into him at work, and we were in the room with the copy machine and the mailboxes, so we started talking. And it turned out he was this delightful man, he had a great sense of humor, and he had he'd been injured in an altercation with someone and had a really bad back, so the way he walked was because he had a physical injury that caused him to do that. And he had foster children, and he had this. I mean, he was a whole person with a perfectly. I loved his sense of humor, but he had his own life, and he was a good man, and he had a physical issue that caused him to shuffle and move slowly. So he's always the person I think of as someone, even though I haven't seen him in over 10 years, I always remember that. So it was only my preferences. It was literally the way I thought people should walk who worked in that prison. They weren't supposed to look like they didn't care, because maybe then they weren't very safe, and they could be, if a prisoner would take it, the prisoners were teenage girls, but they might take advantage of a situation where he's security and it could get out of hand. And that was all that then caused me not to like him very much and to think he was probably goofing off a lot at work. I mean, our stories, when we notice that we have preferences and aversions, our stories just, they just love to grow and grow. So I had an aversion to him, so I needed a good story. It wasn't just enough, that other people didn't like him very much, although that helped. But then my own story could be, well, the way he walked. I didn't think he was being a good enough good enough guard. And turned out he was he took a great interest in the girls who were there, and had a lot of the girls, I found out later, would if he was working on their unit in the evening, before they had to go to their rooms, he would often be someone who would sit and talk with them and talk to them when they really needed someone just to talk. And he would be available for that. So that says something to me. That's always been the thing that made me know how powerful metta practice is. But it also makes me see how we can take these little aversions and these little preferences and turn them into, we write books about them. It becomes something that taints our mind all the time.
This is a more generalized question, but how does the concept of letting go and non-attachment work in a marriage or a committed relationship?
Mm-hmm. Well, when sometimes the monks at our temple will perform marriage ceremonies. And in Buddhism, usually marriage is really a civil ceremony, a civil contract. But people often like to be, if they go to a temple, or if they're close to a monk, they might ask us to do the wedding. But the words in the ceremony that we use at Blue Lotus, I think, speak to that a lot. And what Bhante Sujata used to say to us was, if you love someone, really love them, if you love them enough that, say your husband came to you and said, as much as I love you, I've fallen in love with someone else, and I think to be really happy, I need to be with that person. He said, if you love them enough that you can let them go, then you really love that person. And if you can let them go and let go of your attachment to them. And a lot of people just, no, wait a minute, let's back up, we're not going to be that way. But we think what we do say, even in the wedding ceremony that we do, is that if we really love that person and are making a commitment to spend the rest of our lives together, part of that commitment is that we respect each other enough to let the other person grow and be who they need to be, and we respect them enough to allow them to change. And even the vows are that, I love you enough to let you change and be the person you need to be. And they say that to each other. And it really extends to the point that if someone loves someone enough that they could let them go, and they could let that marriage not be forever. But what we really want it to be is that we respect each other enough, and we know that clinging is always going to lead to a negative outcome, that we can let that person grow and change and evolve, and that we can still every day check our commitment to each other and make sure that it's a relationship that's allowing each of us to grow, and that we don't feel that we're compromising our dignity or our self-respect to be in that relationship. So it's difficult. Marriage is very difficult, and even a committed relationship, because what most of us really know is if we cling too tightly to a person, that's what will suffocate a relationship, because we can't we can't, so what if one person, like I had there's someone from Las Vegas who comes out to Blue Lotus as often as she can. And when the monks go to Las Vegas, she always takes care of them and sets up speaking engagements. And she's always known she's a Democrat, her husband's a Republican. And he's had guns, she knows that. But she recently, and they have a very beautiful, healthy marriage. And they've been married for a long time. And she said that recently, after the Orlando shootings, her husband had been out camping and hiking. So she was the first one to tell him about it. And on the phone, when he was coming back from being away from electronics, for several days. And the first thing he said was something that offended her so much. It was his first response. And then later they could talk about it, but his first response as an NRA member and someone who politically will vote Republican, his comment was so offensive to her. She said, I couldn't talk to him. I couldn't look him in the eyes. And it took her almost a week to really be okay. And he knows her well enough that he knew not to bug her about what was wrong. He knew something was wrong, and she had to talk to him about it. But then she had to be quiet and be with herself. And I was very interested in her process because I saw that I know that I have been around them a lot, and I know how healthy and positive their marriage is. But I thought, what is she going to say about this? Like she said, I couldn't look at him in the eyes for several days, and couldn't even talk about it for a while after the first reaction. But she said, I knew I wasn't going to leave him. I knew I wasn't going to divorce him, but I had to be able to get over just being so upset by what he said. And she was able to do it. And now she can talk about it, and now they can, she was able to tell him how offensive it was, what she said, and he could talk about his point, and they totally disagree, but they know not to argue about it. And she knew that she knew what her limits were. Like it wasn't something that would cause her to walk out of the relationship. But she didn't want to be in the relationship half-heartedly. And so they managed to work it out, which I thought was wonderful. I don't think I don't have that skill set. Not in a marriage. With a good friend, probably. But so it was very interesting for me. And most of us would say, well, political differences aren't going to ruin a relationship, but there are other things that we know certainly can. But I think we can be committed to a person and committed to the life that we are choosing, but it won't work if we think, okay, you promised me something 15 years ago, and I'm holding you to that. That has to be a commitment that we continually make as we grow and evolve, because we both will change, and we aren't quite sure if we're going to change in the same direction. And you see a lot of couples and families with their children hanging on so tightly, like you need to believe what I believe, and you need to have the same values I have, and we need to be just alike. You need to have a family like the one you grew up in. There can be a lot of pressure on younger people because there's that pressure. You're not really okay if you don't turn out to be just like the family taught you to be. And so a lot of times we see families splitting up if people don't have the same beliefs and values, and if their family doesn't look like their parents' family. And in a marriage, I think we have to we get together because we love someone and we feel like we can be successful in a life together, but we have to look at it every day. And the wedding vows that we use say, every day I'll look at this relationship again and recommit to it, or decide I can recommit to it, or that I have to do something, has to shift.
Is chronic back pain caused by clinging to life? And is the cure for it letting go of that life?
Well, I'm only laughing for the first part of the question, not the second. I can't say that chronic back pain, that's not for me to say or anybody else to say, but there are a lot of physical issues that we develop that I think come from clinging, that come from tension. So a lot of us have experienced maybe even back pain that if you start doing yoga, think about the things that some people say are completely like magic: yoga, qigong, tai chi, swimming. There are things that we can do that we know can alleviate that physical pain, that change it a great deal. And some of those are things that cause us to stretch and, become more flexible, and we're kind of letting go physically. But whether it's a reason to end life, I think the better thing to do, and this is what meditation teaches us too, when we experience pain of any kind, whether it's mental suffering or physical pain, first go have a really good doctor, have all the physical things checked out, and do exercises that are safe for your body. Don't ignore that. But then when we have levels of pain that we can't touch with, that we're still experiencing, that's something that we can use as a focus for our meditation practice. And we can work with an awareness of that pain. So even with a simple headache, or even if you're a good way to start, if you're sitting in meditation and you decide, I can't sit anymore because my back hurts or my knee hurts, or you found a comfortable position but your body starts to hurt. Usually that's the body telling us, okay, I want you to get up now and move because I'm getting bored sitting still. And it's usually your brain telling you, I really don't like what you're doing to me, so I want you to feel pain, so you get up and move. So we can look at that pain when we're sitting in meditation. I always ask people, I always say, if you need to move, that's perfectly okay. It's if you need to realign yourself, or somehow your body needs to be shifted to be comfortable, that's okay. But I'd also like you to look at why you need to move. Just a little bit before you move, notice if it's your body being restless or if it's actual physical pain. So you need to shift to become more comfortable. And I think even with that back pain, if we're working with it with whatever treatment that we have for it to try to make it lessen, I think when we're meditating, we can find a position that's comfortable for that back pain. It might be lying on our back, or walking meditation, or lying on our back with our feet up in a chair. But we can find a position that's comfortable, but then part of our meditation can be exploring that pain that we're experiencing, whether it's back pain or a headache or a muscle injury. We can explore that pain with every breath and start to break that pain down into little parts. So that pain, what we're going to see, that pain, like everything else, like that pain is not who we are. So a lot of times we come to identify with our emotions or our pain. So we begin to think and a person who might consider taking their life because the pain is so great, meditation can help them see this pain is not me. And you can do that by the same way we think of our body is not about the concept of anatta, no self. We break our body down in components and see, we're not our guts, we're not our heart, we're not our eyeballs, we're not, and we can, with physical pain, we can, if we try to sit with it, we can start looking at, now where is the pain, where do I really feel the pain in my body? And is the pain constant? Or is there like a rising and a falling of it? Is it throbbing? Does it show up in one part of my body and then it shows up in another part? And we can start looking at that pain and really trying to see if we can take it apart, really see it and understand it, and maybe talk to it. But really start looking at it, the pain that we actually experience in our body. And I found that with a headache, the pain may not be coming from where I think it's coming from. And so once you can almost make a headache go away, depending on the headache itself, by kind of playing with that. Like, where is the pain? And is it constant, or maybe I think it's constant, but maybe it comes and goes. And just kind of dissecting the pain, and that can often help a lot. And so I think if a person has chronic physical pain, meditation is one way to try to help understand the pain better and learn physical ways to work with it. It may not overcome it, but it's a good way to work with it. And so I hope that helps that person. I mean, that pain can be a teacher. Not that, and that doesn't mean cling to it. It can be a good teacher in teaching us that non-attachment and teaching us about that pain is not who I am. So if we become caught up in our emotions, we learn quickly with meditation to recognize we are not that emotion, because all of that's impermanent. Even that pain is impermanent. That pain may come and it may go. And usually most pain is there and then it's not there. Even if it's just intermittent, it's not permanent. And that's what we're always looking at, the impermanence of everything. So what we think, so our emotions are impermanent, that pain is impermanent. If we become very, very angry, even that anger, we feel like I'm going to be angry for forever. I'm so angry about something. But even that comes and goes. It's just like waves. It comes and it goes. And what I think, a thing that relates to pain, that relates right back to anatta, the no self idea, the Buddha always taught, and there are meditations for this, different ones, but one he taught was to you meditate on your body parts. And it's a fun one to, it can get really gross, so kids kind of like the idea of this. But you just meditate on all the parts of your body. And you're basically sort of taking all these parts and you're putting them in little piles. And some of it's like, the gory parts are like some of it's blood and some of it's pus and some of there's pee and there's poop and there's your intestines. And you just take all those components of the body, and then the Buddha said, if you look at your body, a lot of us think that we're our body, so this connects with pain, but it also connects with that no self. What we discover is, it's like looking at a bunch of bags of rice or beans or grains, that we're just little heaps. We're just little bags of different materials. And we are not our bodies. And if we meditate on that enough, we can see that our attachment to our body, well, if we're over the age of 30, I think we see that our body is aging. I don't think we see that until we're past 30. But, you know, we have lots of evidence along the way that our body's changing because we grow up. We have all this evidence, but we still haven't figured out that someday we leave the body behind. And that can become as, if we don't know that, getting old is very fearful. As we see our body really aging and really falling apart and really we're going on, you know, we always say, well, I look old, but I feel young. But that body's still getting old. So the meditations on things like the parts of the body are ways for us to grasp the concept of impermanence and definitely of no self. Because if we identify too much with our body, we're just identifying with those piles of beans and rice. There's no security in that.
It seems like there's a real dichotomy between the concept of no self and kind of our obsession, particularly in the West, with self-centeredness, self-belief, self-image, self-worth, self-achievement. Mm-hmm. And I'm just curious if you could give some practical suggestions, techniques on how do we begin to even catch ourselves to develop a greater awareness and you know, to be able to kind of tackle our obsession with self-centeredness and be able to kind of move towards the concept of no self in a Western context.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point. I was reading, I think, a Burmese teacher recently. It's a book called "Awareness is Not Enough," and he was saying one way to do that is to anything that we do or think is to think, am I doing this because I want other people to see it or know about it, or to give me the credit for it? And am I doing something because it needs to be done, or because I want to show someone I can do it, or there's something for me to gain from doing it? And I thought that's a really subtle question. He said, don't just do something because there's something in it for us, but does it need to be done? So looking at things that way, sort of getting outside of our ego enough to see, am I doing this? Am I doing this for the wrong reasons? Am I doing this to impress someone or to show off? Or am I doing this because there's something that needs to be done? I liked that as just one point of your question. And that even goes to whether we meditate or not, because it might be, I often think it might be a kind of a cool thing for someone to say they meditate, or that they've seen the Dalai Lama or met the Dalai Lama or met this teacher or that teacher, and that can be something that's just done for ego's sake, or almost a way of self-promotion. And here's where I see some really important differences that we need to make. One is, and I see this again in teaching metta and loving kindness, most people will say it's very hard to send themselves loving kindness. And I know it's very hard for people to send themselves thoughts of compassion. But that same person might be the person who's doing a lot of things for self-gratification, and might have a lot of addictive behaviors that they use to comfort themselves. But what they cannot do is just send themselves basic kindness and friendliness. And they can't have compassion for themselves. They might devote their lives to helping others or taking care of others, but they don't know how to take care of themselves. And some of the behaviors that we see instead are like compulsively shopping or eating or going on expensive vacations or spending tons of money on other, I don't know, what would we call, like exercising and fitness and just, excessive amounts. So it looks like just excessive consumption. But I think sometimes, or boasting about themselves, or promoting themselves, or we know, the way you described it was really eloquent. But a lot of times, what's underneath a lot of that is the inability for one to know how to really nurture themselves and take care of themselves. So they're really grasping at lots of other ways outside of themselves to comfort themselves. Is that getting to an answer of what you're?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So I recommend loving kindness practice, because even people that I know have been studying Buddhism and meditating for a long time will continually say, I can send loving kindness to my family, to my friends, even to my difficult people, sometimes to the whole world. I still have trouble with myself. And the reality is, if we have trouble sending that basic kindness to ourselves, we're not really sending it to the rest of the world. That's so essential that we learn how to love ourselves, because everything else springs from that. So if we don't know how to do that, we don't know how to love even our family members. We might know how to take care of them, or we might know how to sacrifice our lives for their lives, but we don't really know how to love them. And that's true in relationships too. If we're in a relationship because we're needy, and our neediness means that we expect too much from another relationship. Again, we're looking outside of ourselves, and then it's chances are it's either going to be two people who are really needy, so they stay together because of that, or they're going to have to work some things out where there's some personal growth, because we need to learn to love ourselves and feel that wholeness, that completion, and then we have something to give. Then we can reach out to others. The same thing in altruistic work that we do, or if you have a passion to help others, that burnout that can happen is often because whatever you're doing, you're giving everything to that cause, but you're not nurturing yourself. So emotionally, you can get really unbalanced.
Like for somebody who always takes care of other people and they don't really give themselves self-love. Mm-hmm. So how does that person get past the guilty portions that, when you think about, okay, well, I want to do something that's good for me. So, maybe I can't do something for you. How do you get past that? When you're trying to love yourself, how do you get past that guilt of not being able to do for that other person because that's all you've known to do, and now you're trying to love yourself, and it's difficult. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Oh yeah, it's difficult. The retreat that I do, it's called Moving into Silence, and I've been doing it for 9 years, and that's one of the things that a lot of, especially women with children, a lot of times they'll say, I would love to do that retreat, but I have to wait for my kids to grow up, because I'm the mom, I can't be away from them for even a day or 2 days. And then something might happen where someone's husband gives them the retreat, or they get it as a gift, and then they have permission to come, and then they realize, oh, I think I'm going to be a better mother if I go back feeling better about myself, feeling more relaxed, feeling like it's okay to have some time and space for myself.
So I think we have to take baby steps and think about that feeling of guilt doesn't help anybody. That's one of those, that's probably something we acquired from a loved one. You know, that guilt is not very helpful, but it can, guilt and shame are things that can just kind of stop us dead in our tracks, but they're not very, it's hard to learn from them. So first realize that, and then take little baby steps. But you have to really believe in the value of loving yourself, and think in terms of the other people. When we're taking care of other people, we really can end up doing damage to other people we love if we're not doing it from a loving, a good place, because it can become, our love can become manipulative or needy, or it's just not clear, it's not clean. And so it's important. And the guilt, you can always think of that guilt as, sometimes the guilt might be just a preference we have. It's just easier. If we feel guilty about it, maybe we won't take a step for ourselves, or maybe it's kind of a safe place to be. But it is difficult because we are all trained that way. But I think love is stronger.
We have another question from online. Does the no self mean the personality or ego? Am I trying to find a higher self? Is there a part of me that is divine? And they say thank you.
Yeah, I'm kind of with, well, okay, I wouldn't use the word divine. It's just not a word that I think of in terms of the Buddhist teachings. But that's just my preference. That's just my aversion. So we're not looking for our higher self. We're looking for ourself. So I think that is ego and personality. It's that self that we're trying to see is who we are without all of that. So, and we don't know who that is. We don't even know how to, there's no secret answer to that question. That's the search that we're all on, is to find out more and more who we are. But we do know who we are not. You know, we aren't all those qualities that we've layered onto ourselves to basically protect ourselves or to survive. And when we are in a position where we don't need that, then it's time to start letting it go and just see where that takes us. What the Buddha taught was that we all have basic goodness. And some people call that Buddha nature, or basic goodness. But we all are perfectly whole, and everything that's happened to us, and you can think of it as over many, many lifetimes, or you can think of it just all of your experiences in this lifetime. Every experience has added another layer, maybe a layer to protect us or camouflage us or make us fit in better or make us get less resistance from other people. You know, all the reasons that we just layer it on like paper mache. And eventually that paper mache gets so thick and hard that we don't remember who we are. And so our job then becomes just taking away, kind of busting out through that like little clay pot that we've built around us, or that paper mache. And then what we find is just what we've always been. So there isn't any higher self or other self or anything higher than ourselves, But I guess it's more of a Hindu idea, I think, to speak about the divine in us. It's not Buddhist terminology. It's just who we are. It's our true self that we're looking for. And that self is connected to all other, that we're all connected. That connection is very important with all other living beings.